The sky above Nearus Prime burned red as the Vex warships positioned themselves in attack formation. Commander Tejo stood at the command center viewport, his weathered face reflecting the glow of emergency lights. 27 years of war had carved deep lines around his eyes. He remembered when the Arlesian Confederation spanned 12 star systems. Now they were reduced to this single planet, their last refuge. "Status report," Tejo called out, his voice steady despite everything. Officer Hanbin looked up from his console, exhaustion evident in his movements. "Shields at 31% capacity. Remaining defense satellites are being picked off one by one. Ground batteries in sectors 7 through 12 have gone silent." Tejo nodded. This was expected. The Vex had always been methodical in their destruction, taking their time to savor each victory. What had started as border disputes had evolved into systematic genocide when the Arlesians refused to surrender their resources. "And our communications?" he asked, though he already knew the answer. "Still broadcasting on all frequencies, Commander," replied Yun-Hee, her fingers dancing across the communication panel. "No responses from any of the neutral territories." Of course not. The Tellurians had signed their non-aggression pact with the Vex 3 years ago. The Brachy Collective had declared themselves uninvolved in regional conflicts shortly after. One by one, every potential ally had turned away, unwilling to face the might of the Vex dominion. Through the viewport, Tejo watched as another defense satellite exploded in a brief flash of light. Its debris would join the growing cloud of wreckage surrounding their once beautiful world. "They're taking their time," observed Sub-Commander Jinwoo, stepping up beside him. "They could have finished this days ago." "They want us to watch," Tejo replied. "They want every Arlesian to understand what happens to those who resist." In the city below, the last civilian evacuations were underway. Millions had already been moved to the underground shelters, massive complexes built into the planets, crust during more optimistic times. They had supplies to last months, but Tejo knew it wouldn't matter. The Vex wouldn't leave anyone alive. "Sir," called Yun-Hee suddenly, "I'm picking up unusual energy readings from the Vex flagship." On the main screen, the massive dreadnought, nearly the size of a small moon, began to glow as its main cannon charged. This weapon had destroyed Arlesian worlds before. They all knew what was coming. "Send the final message," Tejo ordered. Yun-Hee nodded, swallowing hard as she activated the broadcast. Throughout the command center, everyone paused as Tejo's voice echoed through the facility and into space. "This is Commander Tejo of the Arlesian Confederation. Our position is Nearus Prime, coordinates 226.84 by 115.37 Orion Spur. We are under attack by Vex Dominion forces. Our defenses are failing. To any peaceful species who values life and freedom, we request immediate assistance." He paused, the weight of futility pressing down on him. "We know no one is coming, but let this message stand as testimony that we fought until the end." As the message looped and broadcast outward, Tejo turned to his crew. Many had families in the shelters below. All had lost homes and loved ones during the long war. "It has been my greatest honor to serve with each of you," he said simply. Outside, the first wave of Vex landing craft broke through the upper atmosphere, their hulls glowing orange from the friction. Ground teams reported enemy troops deploying across the northern continent. The capital city's outer defenses were already engaged in firefights. In the medical wing, doctors prepared for casualties they couldn't possibly handle. Food rationing had begun weeks ago. Water purification systems were running at emergency levels only. As night fell across their side of the planet, Tejo watched the distant explosions lighting up the horizon. He thought about the history of his people, their arts, their sciences, their beliefs. All of it would be erased, just another extinct civilization in the vast, uncaring universe. On his personal terminal, he opened an image, his family on the shores of Lake Mirren before the war. They were smiling. His daughter would be 23 now if she had survived the fall of their homeworld. "Commander," the shout from Hanbin broke through his memories. "Multiple impacts in the eastern quadrant. They've breached the outer perimeter." Tejo straightened his uniform. It was happening faster than expected. Their message would continue broadcasting long after they were gone, a ghost signal traveling through space, unanswered and unheard. "Prepare all remaining forces," he ordered. "We make our stand here." No one was coming, they all knew it, but they would face the end with courage, even as hope abandoned them. Yunji's eyes burned from staring at her communication console for 18 hours straight. The underground command bunker hummed with the sound of emergency systems and hurried footsteps. Outside, the bombardment continued, each impact sending small tremors through the reinforced walls. She adjusted her headset and continued monitoring the endless static coming through the emergency channels. "Anyone need water?" asked Junho, passing around his last canteen. The young technician had lost his entire family when the Vex destroyed their colony on Talus III. Yet somehow he still found ways to care for others. Yunji shook her head, too focused on her work. For 3 days she had listened to nothing but silence or Vex propaganda broadcasts. The isolation was perhaps worse than the attacks themselves. To die alone, unheard and unhelped, it felt like the universe had turned its back on them. She was about to take a quick break when something changed in the static. A pattern. Her fingers flew across the control panel, isolating the frequency. "I've got something," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. Then louder, "I've got something." Senior officers nearby looked up, their expressions a mix of doubt and the barest hint of hope. "Put it through," ordered Lieutenant Minseo, moving quickly to her station. Yunji's hands trembled slightly as she enhanced the signal. The static cleared, revealing a message in no language she recognized. The computer attempted translation, symbols flashing across her screen. It's a response," she said, her voice catching. "To our distress call." The message appeared. On her screen, "Hold position, coordinates received, ETA 40 minutes. Minseo studied the text, his brow furrowed. "This has to be Vex psychological warfare. They're trying to make us hope before they finish us off." Word spread quickly through the bunker. Commander Teho arrived minutes later, his uniform dusty from the surface. "Show me," he demanded. Yunji played back the transmission. The strange language sounded nothing like the harsh clicks and growls of Vex communication. It was smoother, with rhythms and tones unlike anything in their linguistic database. "Can we verify the source?" Teho asked. "Not with certainty, sir," Yunji replied. "It came from outside our system, but our long-range sensors are heavily damaged." Teho's face remained impassive, but Yunji could see the conflict in his eyes. Hope was dangerous now. False hope could be devastating. "It's a trick," said Security Chief Dae-sung, who had entered behind the commander. "The Vex want us distracted while they move into final position." As if to confirm his words, the bunker shook violently. Dust fell from the ceiling. Direct hit. "On the Western Defense Grid," called out a monitoring officer. "Ground forces have breached the capital's outer wall." On the tactical display, red markers representing Vex troops pushed deeper into their territory. Civilians were still being evacuated from the outer districts, moving toward the central shelters. "We can't afford to be distracted," Teho decided. "Continue evacuation protocols, all remaining fighters to defensive positions." But Yunji couldn't let it go. "Sir, what if it's real? What if someone actually heard us?" "Who?" Dae-sung challenged. "Everyone abandoned us years ago. Nobody's coming." She kept monitoring the frequency, searching for any follow-up transmission, while around her the command center prepared for their final stand. Officers called out reports of falling defense systems and advancing enemy units. Medical stations reported overwhelming casualties. 25 minutes after the message, Yunji's console lit up again. "Sir, another transmission, same source." This time the message was clearer. "Prepare for arrival, stand by." Before anyone could respond, the sensor officer shouted in alarm. "Commander, massive energy spikes detecting at the edge of the system. Something's coming through." The main display showed a section of space near the outer planet suddenly distorting. At first, they thought it might be a sensor malfunction, but then the readings became clearer. The energy output was enormous, far beyond what even the largest Vex dreadnought could generate. "Is it another Vex fleet?" someone asked. The sensor officer shook his head, looking bewildered. "No, these signatures don't match any Vex configurations. They're not matching anything in our database." On the screen, the distortion grew. Space itself seemed to fold and ripple. "What are we looking at?" Teho demanded. Unknown, sir. But whatever it is, it's big. Really big. Yunji felt her heart pounding. The mysterious message, these strange energy readings, could it actually be help arriving? But who would come for them now after all this time? Sir, she said quietly to Commander Taeho, the timing matches the message exactly. 40 minutes. Taeho's face showed the first real emotion she'd seen in days. Uncertainty. Keep all channels open, he ordered her, and get me a direct line to whatever that is. The command center fell into an eerie quiet, the sounds of the ongoing battle temporarily forgotten as all eyes turned to the display. The energy readings continued to spike. Something was tearing a hole in space at the edge of their system. Incoming communication, Yunji announced suddenly. They're hailing us directly now. A new voice filled the command center, clear, human-like, but speaking with an accent none of them had heard before. The translation system worked to keep up. Arlesian Command, this is Fleet Admiral entering your space. Respond if you can hear us. Taeho picked up the communicator, his hand steady despite everything. He looked around the room at his people, exhausted, wounded, but suddenly alert with something they had all forgotten. Possibility. This is Commander Taeho of the Arlesian Confederation. We hear you. His voice nearly broke on the next words. Who are you? The reply came immediately. We're humanity, and we're here to help. The Arlesian command center erupted in chaos as the main view screen filled with an impossible sight. Where moments before there had been empty space at the edge of their system, now hundreds of warships poured through what looked like tears in the fabric of reality itself. Magnify, Commander Taeho ordered, his voice barely audible over the commotion. The image zoomed in on the closest vessels. They were unlike anything the Arlesians had ever seen. Sleek yet clearly built for war, with angular hulls that seemed to absorb rather than reflect light. No two ships appeared identical, yet they moved with perfect coordination, flowing into defensive formations around the larger vessels at their center. Are they real? Lieutenant Minseo whispered, voicing what many were thinking. The sensor operator nodded vigorously. Completely solid readings, sir. I count over 300 distinct vessels. The largest appears to be nearly 2 kilometers in length. On a separate channel, they could hear the Vex communications suddenly explode with activity. The enemy fleet, which had been leisurely bombarding the planet, was now repositioning. 6 massive Vex dreadnoughts turned away from nearest prime, orienting toward the newcomers. They're hailing the unknown fleet, Yunji reported from her communications station. The translation came through clearly for everyone to hear. The harsh, clicking voice of Void Commander Thrax, leader of the Vex Armada, filled the room. Unidentified. Vessels, you have entered restricted Dominion space. Identify yourselves immediately or be destroyed. You have 10 seconds to comply. Taeho exchanged glances with his officers. The Vex never negotiated. This was merely their standard warning before opening fire. The response came not just to the Vex but broadcast on all frequencies, so the Arlesians could hear it as well. The voice was calm, measured, and carried absolute authority. This is Admiral Duyung of the United Earth Defense Fleet. We received a distress call from this system and have come to render assistance to the Arlesian people. Your forces are engaged in what appears to be an unprovoked attack on a civilian population. We request you cease hostilities immediately and withdraw from this system. The silence that followed lasted only moments before the Vex response came. Earth vessels, this conflict does not concern you. The species you reference has been condemned for crimes against the Dominion. Leave now or share their fate. In the command center, no one breathed. The unknown fleet, this Earth defense fleet, was massively outnumbered by the Vex Armada. Even with hundreds of ships, they faced over 1,000 Vex vessels, including their planet-killer dreadnoughts. Sir, said the tactical officer quietly. To Taeho, these newcomers can't possibly win. They don't know what they're facing. On screen, they watched as the Vex warships began powering up their main weapons. Characteristic green energy built along their flanks, a sight the Arlesians had learned to fear over years of defeat. They're going to open fire, Taeho said grimly. The Earth Admiral's voice came again, this time with a note of finality. Vex, Command, we have analyzed your weapon systems powering up. This constitutes a hostile action. Be advised, We will defend ourselves and the Arlesian people with all necessary force. What happened next occurred so quickly that the Arlesian sensors could barely track it. The 6 Vex dreadnoughts fired simultaneously, their energy weapons lancing across space toward the Earth fleet. It should have been devastating. These same weapons had destroyed entire Arlesian battle groups in seconds, but the energy beams never reached their targets. Somehow, the Earth vessels simply weren't where the shots were aimed. They had moved, with impossible speed, as if they had anticipated the exact firing pattern seconds before it happened. How did they? Began Security Chief Dae-sung, but his question died as the Earth fleet responded. Small dart-like craft launched from the larger vessels, accelerating at speeds that defied Arlesian understanding of propulsion technology. Behind them, the larger Earth warships began firing weapons that didn't release energy beams or projectiles the Arlesians recognized. Instead, points of intense light appeared directly beside or inside the Vex ships, followed by explosions that seemed to consume the vessels from within. "What kind of weapons are those?" gasped Minseo. "I don't know," replied the tactical officer, frantically checking readings. "It's as if they're creating micro-singularities directly inside the enemy hulls." 3 Vex dreadnoughts erupted in simultaneous explosions, their mighty frames breaking apart as if they were made of paper. The smaller Vex vessels attempted to regroup, but the human fighters were among them now, moving with precision that suggested either incredible pilots or some form of advanced automation. "They're using targeting systems beyond anything we've seen," said the sensor operator in awe. "The precision is unreal." In space, the battle unfolded with shocking speed. The Vex, for the first time in Arlesian memory, appeared confused. Their formations broke apart as they tried to adapt to fighting an enemy whose tactics and technology they couldn't predict. A new transmission came through, this time directed specifically to the Arlesian Command Center. "Commander Taiho, this is Admiral Du Young. We're engaging the enemy fleet now. Can your remaining forces provide us with tactical data on Vex weak points and communication protocols? Our preliminary analysis suggests vulnerabilities we can exploit." Taiho grabbed the communicator, his hands trembling slightly. "Admiral, this is Commander Taiho. We're transmitting all tactical data we have." He paused, then added, "May I ask, who are you? Where did you come from? How did you receive our distress call?" There was a brief pause as another Vex cruiser disappeared in a flash of light. "We're humans, Commander, from Earth. We've been monitoring deep space transmissions for decades. Your people's call reached us 3 years ago. We've been traveling to reach you ever since." Around Taiho, his officers exchanged stunned glances. 3 years? These strangers had spent 3 years traveling to help a species they'd never met. On the tactical display, the battle continued to unfold. The Vex ships were now in full retreat, pulling back to regroup, but the Earth vessels pressed forward, not allowing them to reorganize. "Watch Sector 7, called out the tactical officer. Suddenly, a damaged Vex dreadnought, its systems failing, was making a suicide run toward Nearest Prime. If it impacted or detonated its core in the atmosphere, millions of Arlesians would die instantly. Before anyone could react, 5 Earth vessels broke formation and intercepted the dreadnought. They surrounded it, and some kind of energy field appeared between them, containing the massive ship. As the Arlesians watched in disbelief, the dreadnought's forward momentum halted completely. They've stopped it," breathed Dae-sung. "How is that possible?" "The mass alone should have—" "Commander," interrupted Yunji, "Admiral Du Young is requesting permission to land a delegation at our main spaceport. They say they have medical supplies and defensive equipment." Taiho looked around at his officers, at the faces that had known nothing but defeat and despair for so long. Now they showed something new, hope. "Tell them," he said, his voice steady. "They are most welcome." Outside, the battle continued to rage, but its outcome was no longer in doubt. Humanity had arrived, and everything had changed. From the rooftop of the damaged Defense Command Tower, Commander Taiho watched in amazement as another wave of human dropships cut through the smoky sky. They moved with incredible precision. evading Vex anti-aircraft fire that had shredded Arlesian vessels for years. Behind him, his communication officer held up a field transmitter, allowing him to hear battle updates from across the continent. "Eastern Quadrant reports Vex forces in full retreat," came the breathless voice of Colonel Sujin. "The humans have pushed them back beyond the river line." Taeho could hardly believe it. Just hours ago they had been preparing for extinction. Now the tide had turned so dramatically that even his most battle-hardened officers spoke with wonder in their voices. "What about the civilian shelters in the northern district?" he asked, remembering the thousands of families trapped there when Vex ground forces had cut off the evacuation route. "That's the most incredible part, sir," replied Sujin. "Human strike teams dropped directly into the hot zone. They've secured all 3 shelter entrances and are evacuating civilians now." A deafening roar drew Taeho's attention skyward. Overhead, human fighter craft engaged Vex aerial units. The difference in combat approach was striking. Where Vex, fighters relied on overwhelming firepower and sheer numbers, the human vessels displayed a fluid, almost artistic precision. They moved as if they could predict their enemy's actions seconds before they occurred. "Commander, you need to see this," called Lieutenant Minseo, waving him toward the edge of the rooftop. In the main plaza below, a human ground unit was engaging a Vex heavy assault team. The Vex soldiers stood nearly 3 meters tall in their battle armor, armed with devastating plasma weapons that could melt through Arlesian defenses like paper. Against these monsters, the humans seemed small, almost fragile. But as Taeho watched, he understood why the Vex were losing. The humans wore powered armor, unlike anything he had seen before. Not bulky like the Vex suits, but streamlined and responsive. They moved faster than seemed possible, jumping incredible distances, their armor somehow anticipating and enhancing their natural movements. One human soldier dodged a plasma blast that would have incinerated her, the movement so quick it blurred in Taeho's vision. She then fired a weapon that produced no visible beam or projectile, yet caused the Vex soldier to collapse, as if its nervous system had simply shut down. "Their combat technology is beyond anything we've encountered," Minseo said quietly. 1. Human soldier is engaging multiple Vex heavy units and winning. Across the city, this scene was repeating itself. Human drop teams secured key positions, while their fleet above continued to systematically dismantle the Vex armada. On his transmitter, Taeho heard reports of human medical teams already working to save Arlesian wounded, using treatment methods that healed injuries his people considered fatal. "Commander, Admiral Du Young is requesting to meet with you," said the communications officer. "Their command shuttle is approaching the southern landing pad." 20 minutes later, Taeho stood in what remained of the central command post as the human delegation entered. They removed their helmets, revealing faces that looked surprisingly similar to Arlesians, though their skin tones and features had subtle differences. Admiral Du Young was shorter than Taeho had expected, a woman with short grey hair and eyes that reflected both warmth and steel. "Commander Taeho," she said, offering a gesture that his cultural database identified as a respectful bow. "I apologize for our delayed arrival." Through his translator implant, Taeho replied, "Admiral, your arrival has saved my entire species from extinction. There is nothing to apologize for." Around them, human and Arlesian officers began coordinating their efforts, sharing tactical information and deployment plans. The humans brought advanced holographic displays that showed real-time battle information from across the planet and in orbit. "We've secured the main population centers," Du Young explained, gesturing to the map. "Our fleet has pushed the remaining Vex vessels to the edge of your system. They're attempting to regroup, but we've deployed interdiction fields to prevent reinforcements from arriving." Taeho studied the human admiral carefully. The question that had burned in his mind since their arrival finally escaped his lips. "Why? Why would you come? Your people don't know us. This war has nothing to do with you. You've risked your lives, traveled for years." Du Young's expression softened. She gestured to her second-in-command, who handed her a small device. When activated, it projected an image of a blue-green planet. "This is Earth, our homeworld," she said. 300 years ago, we nearly destroyed ourselves in wars over resources, ideology, territory. We stood at the edge of our own extinction, not from outside invaders, but from our own hands. She switched the image to show devastated cities, environmental catastrophe. We learned the hardest lesson any species can learn, how fragile life is, how easily it can be erased from the universe. Her eyes met Taiho's directly. When we finally reached the stars and developed deep space listening technology, we made a promise. We would never again stand by while sentient life faced extinction. We were alone once too. We know what it means to fight against the end of everything you are. A tremendous explosion shook the building. Outside, a Vex destroyer attempting to breach the atmosphere had been intercepted by human vessels, the resulting blast briefly turning night to day. My people have a saying, Du Young continued. The darkness is vast, but a single light can. Push it back. Today we stand with you against the darkness. For the first time since the war began, Taiho felt something beyond the grim determination to simply survive one more day. He felt hope, not just for temporary reprieve, but for actual victory. Our remaining forces are at your disposal, Admiral, he said. We will fight alongside you. The human officers nodded with approval. One of them, a tall man with a scar across his cheek, stepped forward. We've adapted our tactical systems to integrate with your remaining defense grid, he explained. Your soldiers' knowledge of the terrain and enemy patterns is invaluable. This isn't us saving you. This is us fighting together. As if to emphasize his point, the building shook again, but this time it was from cheering in the streets below. Through the broken windows, Taiho could see Arlesian civilians emerging from shelters, watching in awe as human fighter craft soared overhead, driving back the enemies that had terrorized them for so long. On his transmitter, reports continued to flow in from all fronts. Vex forces retreating from the capital outskirts. Human medical teams have restored power to the Eastern Hospital complex. Orbital bombardment has ceased completely. The battle was far from over. The Vex were wounded but not defeated. Yet for the first time in this long, bitter war, Taiho allowed himself to believe that his people might have a future after all, thanks to strangers from across the stars who had decided that no species should face extinction alone. The Grand Hall of the Arlesian High Council had not been used in years. Dust covered the ancient stone seats, where representatives from all 12 worlds once gathered. Now, as the evening light filtered through newly repaired windows, the hall buzzed with activity once more. Arlesian officials in formal attire mingled with human officers, their voices creating a hopeful murmur that echoed off the high ceiling. Commander Taiho straightened his ceremonial uniform as he approached the central platform. The last time he had stood here, it had been to announce the fall of their third-to-last colony. Today, just 2 weeks after the human fleet's arrival, he stood before his people to formalize something none of them had dared imagine: victory. The latest reports confirm it, Sub-Commander Jinwoo told him quietly. The Vex fleet has withdrawn beyond the outer asteroid belt. Their remaining ground forces surrendered this morning. Taiho nodded, still unable to fully process how quickly everything had changed. And our casualties? Remarkably low. The human medical teams. Jinwoo shook his head in wonder. They've saved people we would have considered beyond help. Their regenerative technology is unlike anything we've seen. At the far end of the hall, the massive doors swung open. The assembled Arlesians fell silent as the human delegation entered. They were led by Admiral Du Young in formal dress uniform, flanked by her senior officers. Behind them came Ji Ho, the diplomatic representative from Earth's United Governmental Council. Unlike the military personnel with their crisp uniforms and precise movements, Ji Ho wore flowing robes of deep blue. He moved with a thoughtful grace, his eyes taking in the ancient hall with obvious appreciation for its history. Taiho had spent several days with the diplomat and found him to be deeply knowledgeable about Arlesian culture, as if he had studied them for years. "All rise for the Emergency Provisional Council," announced an Arlesian official. The surviving council members, only 7 of the original 24, took their places on the platform. Elder Hyun Ki, the oldest among them, stepped forward with the help of a cane. Despite his age and the hardships of the past years, his voice carried clearly through the hall. For 3 decades we have fought against extinction. We have lost worlds, families, hope itself. Today we gather not in retreat, but in victory. A victory made possible by friends we never knew we had. He gestured toward the human delegation, and the hall erupted in applause. Many Arlesians had tears streaming down their faces. Some held up children born during the war who had never known anything but fear and hiding. When the applause finally subsided, Elder Hyun-Ki continued. We have asked diplomat Ji-ho to address our people, to help us understand who our allies are and why they came to our aid when all others abandoned us. Ji-ho approached the speaking platform with a respectful bow. The translator devices distributed throughout the hall ensured everyone would understand his words. People of Nereus Prime, survivors of the Arlesian Confederation, he began, his voice gentle yet carrying to every corner of the room. I bring greetings from Earth and all human colonies. Though we are strangers to you, we do not consider ourselves strangers to your struggle. He activated a small device in his hand, and a holographic image appeared above the platform, a blue-green world spinning slowly. This is Earth, our homeworld. Beautiful, isn't it? But this beauty hides a painful history. The image changed to show cities in ruins, skies darkened with smoke, oceans rising to swallow coastal regions. 372 years ago, humanity stood at the brink of self-destruction. We had split into factions, weaponized our technology, poisoned our planet. We fought over resources, ideology, perceived differences. We nearly ended our own story. The images shifted again, showing the gradual rebuilding of civilization. New cities rising with greenery integrated into their structures, oceans being cleaned, forests replanted. We survived, but barely. The great reconciliation that followed taught us the most important lesson any sentient species can learn. Life is precious and terrifyingly fragile. When we finally developed space travel beyond our solar system, we carried this lesson with us. Ji-ho paused, his eyes scanning the hall before continuing. 57 years ago, our deep space listening posts detected your first distress calls. We were too far away to help immediately. Your signals described the fall of your outer colonies, the advance of the Vex Dominion. We knew we could not reach you quickly enough with our existing technology. This revelation sent whispers through the crowd. 57 years ago, the war had barely begun then, so we accelerated our jump drive research program. We built ships that could travel farther and faster than ever before. We trained crews specifically for this mission. The expedition to reach you became humanity's most ambitious project. He smiled slightly. Many said it was impossible, that we should focus on defending our own territories, but our history would not let us turn away. We had made a promise to ourselves. Never again would we watch life being extinguished if we could prevent it. An Arlesian woman in the front row stood up, her voice shaking with emotion. You spent years traveling across unknown space for a species you had never met. Ji-ho nodded. We did. Because in the vastness of the universe, sentient life is the most precious thing we know. Your extinction would have diminished us all. Commander Tae-ho watched the faces of his people as they absorbed this. After decades of betrayal and abandonment by former allies, the idea that strangers would make such sacrifices was almost incomprehensible. Elder Hyun-Ki stepped forward again. Diplomat Ji-ho, the Arlesian people owe you a debt we can never repay. But we must ask, what happens now? The Vex will return. They have never accepted defeat. Ji-ho turned to Admiral Du Young, who joined him at the platform. We are not leaving, the Admiral stated simply. With your permission, we will establish a permanent Earth defense fleet base in this system. Our engineers have already begun integrating our shield technology with your planetary defense grid. Displays around the hall activated, showing construction already underway in orbit, massive structures that would become a defensive station, unlike anything the Arlesians had previously possessed. Additionally, Ji-ho continued, Earth extends formal invitation to the Arlesian people to join the Interstellar Cooperative. You will receive full protection status while you rebuild, and eventual equal membership when you are ready. The implications of this announcement were enormous. The Arlesians would not just survive, They would become part of something larger, something protected. "This is just the beginning," Admiral Du Young added. "Joint human-Arlesian training programs have already started. Your soldiers fight with remarkable courage and adaptability. Together we will be stronger than either of us alone." Over the following weeks, as human ships helped secure the Arlesian home system, news spread through the galaxy. Species that had bowed to Vex dominance began quiet rebellions. Others, previously neutral, sent diplomatic inquiries to both Earth and Nearus Prime. The message was clear. The balance of power had shifted. A new force had emerged. Not conquerors like the Vex, but protectors who fought for a principle rather than territory or resources. In the rebuilt gardens outside the council hall, Commander Tai Ho stood with Jiho, watching Arlesian children, playing with the children of human officers. They were teaching each other games, laughing despite not fully understanding each other's languages. "Your people adapt quickly," Jiho observed. "Your engineers have already improved our shield modulation technology." Taeho nodded. "Survival breeds innovation, but hope," he gestured to the playing children, "hope breeds something greater. Yatasi, Vex won't accept this defeat," Jiho acknowledged. "Their entire empire is built on the belief that they cannot be challenged." "Let them come," Taeho replied with a confidence he would have thought impossible just weeks ago. "They'll find us ready, and this time we won't be alone." Overhead, human and Arlesian ships patrolled together, their contrasting designs complementing each other in the dance of defense. The age of Vex dominance was over. Something new had begun, something built not on conquest, but on the simple, powerful idea that in the cold vastness of space, no one should have to face extinction alone.